Hey guys, I'm going to solve the final three questions on the try it problem from chapter 23, numbers 16, 17, and 18. We're working with the same data that we were for the previous try it problem, only we're ignoring the first half of the data and we're only going to work with the fixed overhead. So the question wants us to calculate the following variances, and number 16 says fixed overhead cost variance. Number 17 says fixed overhead volume variance, and then fixed total overhead variance. Okay, so in order to solve those for all three of those values, we need to make the little chart that he did in class, and it looks like this. It says, I titled it fixed overhead variance, and then to the far left it's the allocated amount, the actual amount, actual overhead, and then in the middle is budgeted, and then to the far right is the allocated. Okay, between the difference between budgeted and allocated is the volume variance, and the difference between the actual and the budgeted is the cost variance. Okay, so some of these values are already given, so let's go ahead and just look and see what is given to us, and we'll fill it in, fill in what's given. So it says right here, actual cost of fixed overhead, actual overhead $750. Okay, and budgeted fixed overhead $700. $700. Okay, and the difference between 750 and 700 is 50. Okay, all these are dollar amounts, so I'll just go ahead and put in the formatting. And the key to this problem is figuring out the allocated overhead. Now, if you'll remember from class, in order to calculate the allocated overhead, we need to use this algebraic formula. Allocated equals standard cost times standard quantity. Okay, so then the question becomes, what is standard cost, SC? Well, ordinarily we would have to calculate this. On the test we have to calculate this, and in class he told us we're going to have to calculate this. But in this problem they gave it to us. So we'll just use what's given to us in the problem, but I'll tell you how to calculate it if we did have to calculate it. So SC is equal to 0.25 per direct labor hour. Okay, so in order to calculate the standard cost, it is exactly the same as we did in chapter 17 for predetermined overhead allocation rate, except in this case we're just calling it SC instead of predetermined overhead allocation rate. And to do that, it's total estimated overhead cost divided by total estimated quantity of the overhead allocation base. So the only tricky thing, and it tripped me up for a little bit, is both of these numbers are estimated and estimated. In this problem, they gave us actual. So don't confuse actual and estimated. In order to calculate this, we have to use estimated and estimated. So that's the only part about this problem that I don't particularly like. So now that we have the SC rate, we also need to find the SQ, standard quantity. And as you'll probably remember if you watched the previous video, the standard quantity is equal to the efficiency standard here, 2 directed labor hours per shirt, times the number of shirts and it says we produced 1,200 shirts. And that's 2,400 units, not dollars. Okay, so now we have the two values that we need, standard quantity and standard cost. So we just multiplied those two together. And this, I need to label this direct labor hours. So the label helps you see that we used 2,400 direct labor hours. How much did we charge? Per direct labor hour was a quarter. So for 2,400 hours times a quarter, and that will give us our allocated rate. So that equals 2,400 times 25 cents, and that value is $600. Okay. And now that we have the allocated, we can calculate the volume variance, and that simply equals the difference between this and this. Okay. So now we have to decide, are they favorable or unfavorable? He gave us two ways to do that, and I'll just tell you the way I think about it. The easiest one to determine, in my opinion, are these two. If your actual is higher than your budgeted, obviously that's unfavorable. So actual is more than budgeted, that's not good. So that's unfavorable. Now once you have that figured out, you can, by the process of elimination, you can figure this out. So then once I found this out, I look at this 750 here and this 600 here. The difference between 750 and 600 is 150. So, well, I got 100 here and I got 50 here. So 750 and 600, I gotta get 150 difference. So it must be unfavorable, because both of those added together have to equal the difference between the two of these. Now the tricky thing that he did on the third exam was one of these was favorable and one of them was unfavorable, so they kind of canceled each other out, and that's why you had to first determine one and then by process of elimination cancel the other one out. But if they're both the same, it makes it easy. So my suggestion would be to figure these two out first, because it's very simple in your mind to understand. If your actual is more than your budgeted, obviously that's unfavorable. Once you have that, then you can compare these two, and by process of elimination, understand that will be either favorable or unfavorable, depending on if it's if you need to add to that value to get the difference, or if you need to lessen the value. So that's the solution to the fixed overhead problem. I did it previously, and I want to check to make sure that everything I told you is correct. So I'll just copy paste my previous problem here and compare the answers. Okay, so here we have 750, 750, 50 unfavorable, 50 unfavorable, 700, 700, 100 unfavorable, 100 unfavorable, 600, 600. So that's correct, and here are the calculations that I did, but those aren't particularly important. So I hope that helps with one of the more difficult problems on the final. We're likely to see it again, so good luck, guys.